Well, thank you, Governor Herbert, and thank you all for coming today. Those of you online, thank you for. Governor Herbert mentioned that I was in the classroom for 15 years. That was about 25 years ago, so I've never taught hybrid before. But here's my first chance, so we'll see how well I do. But I welcome all those of you who are joining us remotely. And those of you, for those of you joining remotely, you don't know there's about 8,000 people here. It's very noisy and loud and dense, and so you're very lucky to be a part of this select group. I'm actually a little humbled to be here. First of all, the idea of a lecture is humbling because the word itself connotes, for me at least, getting on my phone or snoozing or both at the same time if I can. So I'm going to try not to do a lecture, but instead invite, if you will, a conversation. And I think at this time in the stage as we think of the university is an environment where in the old days we thought the wise would go up to the mountains or off to the ivory towers and bring back information to the unwise, to the unwashed, you know, the young people that didn't know anything. I think that model's gone. I hope it's gone. The world we live in now has the idea that knowledge is generated in creative discourse and in collaboration, as the governor's just said, in discourse where big ideas clash with one another so that new ideas are created, not so that you just end up getting, becoming a winner or a loser, but so that something new arises. We've seen that in the pandemic. So anyway, I hope to inaugurate this institute in the spirit in which I think the governor led throughout his career in the State House and before. It was so moving to me the first time we met. I think he was a little tentative, honestly, about Tammy inviting me in. I'm just going to say that I think he was a little anxious about who the hell is this guy coming into the state of Utah. But we sat down for a little bit, and I know you all are familiar with this, but he said it to me. He said, I try to lead by being conservative in principle, moderate in tone, and inclusive in process. And the first thing I said was, have you written that down? He says, yeah, I give it in a speech every day, pal. But it all of a sudden struck me, that the solution to our problems is within us. We have these ideas. The idea that you can lead a state like this by being conservative in principle, if that's your principle, moderate in tone, but inclusive in process, that's a formula for a different kind of politics right there. So in some ways, I'm just here to amplify what you all in this state know so well, which is a model where whether we agree on every issue or not, we can find ways to be creative on every difference. And I think that's in large measure what we're trying to do. Let me begin with this slide on the screen here. Some of you may have noticed that just last week, Michael Collins, the astronaut who was responsible for piloting the lunar mission, the first lunar mission where Neil Armstrong stepped on the moon, passed away last week. And this is a picture he took. It's known, some people call it the only picture ever taken in which all life is in the frame except one person. So Collins takes the picture. Armstrong and Aldrin are in the lunar module there, coming towards where he is. And the entirety of the Earth is in the frame. So at least all life as we know it is in the picture. And he wrote, as he looked at the Earth from his vantage point, he wrote the words that you see on the screen. The thing that really surprised me was that it projected an air of fragility. Why, I don't know. I love this. I don't know to this day. I just had a feeling. It's tiny. It's shiny, it's beautiful, it's home, and it's fragile. It's tiny, it's shiny, it's beautiful, it's home, and it's fragile. If you listen to what the governor just said, reaching back to the ideals of our founding fathers, we reach back that far when we have to, when we're in a fragile state, where we have to find the heartbeat of our narrative. Who really are we? Wait a minute, pause, everyone, stop the trains. Who the heck are we? So we go back in moments of fragility to find the root, find the core, find our gospel as a country. And I love that Collins, from a very different perspective, is telling us that today we're fragile. Maybe throughout all time, but at least to me, the words speak. Now, if you want a picture of what fragility looks like right now, here it is. Gary Herbert, the Republican governor of Utah, he didn't have a coffee with a Kennedy, but he came as close to having coffee in front of the camera as you can come. A Republican and a Democrat. I come from a very progressive, some would say socialist, sorry. I mean, I know that's what people call me. I'm not a socialist, but anyway. But if you took the names that people that come from where I come from are called, and the names called by the other side, you'd say, my God, make sure people don't see this picture. I mean, he didn't have to run again. Sorry. Yeah, you don't download, please. But it's a joke, but it's true. I mean, we mentioned the relationship between Senators Hatch and Senator Kennedy, my uncle. But, you know, I think it was possible in part because they were both safe. Senator Hatch wasn't likely to be threatened politically, so he could. I mean, the idea that we can't work together, that it's almost dangerous, fragile, bespeaks a level of crisis that I'm not sure, as much as we talk about it, we really understand. And the urgency that this institute invites, right now, in this state, with enormous possibility, the urgency it invites cannot be overstated. We all know a lot of this data, so I won't bore you with an academic version of this. But this data is actually about, I think, 2 years old. But 90% of our country thinks that among the most serious problems we face are the internal division among us. Now, not only do we think we're divided, we also think it's a serious problem. The slide I don't have here is when you ask people, do you know what to do about it? Almost everyone says no. That's a crisis. You've got a serious problem. Everyone knows it, and no one knows what to do. Or I shouldn't say no one. Almost no one knows what to do about it. Now that you could say is just politics, but it's not just politics. Again, I could give you 5 of these slides. You've seen them all. Half of Americans now report feeling lonely. So imagine splitting this room. Look to your right and to your left. One of those people feels lonely. One of those people feels lonely a lot. One of those people maybe feel lonely in their own family. One of those people feels like they're so threatened by other people that they have to keep to themselves. They don't talk at work, they don't make friends, they don't reach out. 2 in 5, not on this slide, 25% of us have ended a relationship within our own families in the last 3 years. I talked to a former colleague of yours, Governor, earlier. He says, I've had a friend since 3rd grade. One of my best friends, I was in his wedding, he was in my wedding, we played football together. After the election this past fall, he wrote me in a text, don't ever call me again, we're finished. I just heard that today. And I wrote him back, he said, don't try to make it up. It's over. Because of an election. Nothing he said, wasn't like it wasn't personal, but the political has become personal. 30% of Americans, 3 weeks ago in a poll, said they want their state to secede from the Union. It's almost, you bring up the Constitution, it's almost time for a constitutional convention of some kind when you've got that level of division in the country. So our view here, the governor mentioned the book here, our division is actually being made worse. I dare say, and I'm sorry to say this because I have many political figures in my family, I love politicians, I love politics itself, but the politics and the media are making it worse. Get on a mailing list of someone of the other party. Just give $2. I say in this room, give $2 to a Democrat. And you'll get on their weekly mailing list. You won't believe what you're going to read. You won't. I'm telling you, because you read it from your own point of view, you think, oh, that kind of makes sense. They are horrible. they really do hate our values. They really are the problem. They're ruining everything. They're ruining everything. You know what's wrong with the country? It's their fault. Put the words in either party. You don't have to, I'm sorry to tell you, because it's hard for us to realize this. Both of our parties use the exact same language and operate under the same myth that is being fed to them by people profiting from the myth. Right? What happens if you say this on CNN or Fox or MSNBC? Ratings like this. What happens if you say conservative in principle, moderate in tone, inclusive in process? What do they do? What are you going to do if you're earning a living and you're trying to get the primetime slot on MSNBC or Fox? You're going to say they hate us. It's a devil's bargain, but people make it all the time, I'm sorry to say. And most of the people that I've talked to in those businesses making that bargain don't like it. They themselves feel a desire to get out. Now, what we've come to realize, or what we've come to believe, is that both sides are missing one fundamental ingredient. That we actually are living through a crisis of meaning, a crisis of trust. And that the number one problem, I'm going to say this knowing that there are a lot of problems. There's inequality, there's racism, there's immigration, there's pro-life, pro-choice, there's taxes, there's productivity, there's trade, there's all that stuff. I know those are really big problems. Education, you name it. A lot of things all of us care about deeply. That's why we're here. But the number one problem, if you ask me, is this crisis of trust and meaning between us. Not within us, but between us. And when that crisis reaches its boiling point, what happens is you have an outbreak of hatred and contempt and demonizing. You no longer have a strong enough fabric of trust between us, so when you and I disagree, it's no longer friends, it's you devil. You're bad. You're out of control. You're a contemptible person. It's disgusting the way you talk. I'm outraged. That's a crisis of meaning. We don't share enough common ground. So you ask yourself, if you go with me just long enough to take the premise that maybe that's going on, what are the building blocks of meaning and trust in relationships? We've went out to psychologists, anthropologists. We've read over the last 2 years almost all the great religious texts on this. Spirituality, New Age, you name it. We looked everywhere. Organizational theory, businesses that have sciences now. You can go to Northwestern. They have an institute at the Northwestern School of Business dedicated to the science of trust. And almost none of us, at least I'll speak for myself, very few of us actually have tried to bring the science and practice of trust and meaning making to our shared political life. So the question we ask at the end of this pandemic, and I believe the question this institute is in some ways founded to ask, is what kind of normal do we want? If we're not where we want to be, some would say we're not where we used to be. We can all say we're not where we need to be next. And so the question we need to ask ourselves, our students, our faculty, visiting professors, our colleagues, is what actually do we want? What's the normal we want? Now, our view is that this is an age-old dilemma with a new challenge. So what does this picture mean? So I don't know how many of you have heard the old Cherokee story. The young person goes to the elder and says, I'm tortured all the time. I feel like some days I want to do the right thing. Some days I feel angry and hostile. Other days I feel loving and compassionate. And the elder says, you have two wolves inside of you, a good wolf and a bad wolf. And the young person says, which one's going to win? And the elder answers, the one you feed. This institute, if I were offering a chance to define it, is got to answer the question, how do we feed the good wolf? It's not going to be a policy answer. It's going to be a leadership answer. It's It's going to be a vision answer. It's going to be a style and a manner answer. It's not going to be a political ideology answer, if you ask me. So we looked at this question, and here's what we came up with. There are people who we refer to in our own shorthand as uniters. Here's what they do. First, they honor the dignity of the other. Now, some would call this a value. Some psychologists call this a universalist value. Everybody has dignity. Some would call it a political principle. The business folks call it the benevolence principle in business. You actually respect all of your customers and your employees. They don't earn your respect. They already have it. It can't be taken. So you start with the religious leaders, the religious text. You'll see in the book, beautiful, saying, everyone is a house of God, Jackie Lewis writes. Everyone is a house of God. So that's principle number one. The uniters somehow know, in whatever language they use, that everybody belongs. Secondly, they cross divides. Think of Lincoln at Gettysburg or at the second inaugural, malice toward none, in the middle of a war, the most violent war in our history. Malice toward none, having seen men, mostly men, killed by the tens of thousands within 50, 100 miles of the White House. Malice toward none. How does he get there? You could obviously find texts in our religious language. Love your enemy. Cross the divide to your enemy. The texts are there. They come. Dr. King is replete with texts, with stories, with the message that he was not willing to demonize the other side. Crossing the divides over and over again. They challenge contempt. They don't challenge other points of view. They don't pause from challenging other points of view. I could say, I don't agree with you at all on this. But contempt, they challenge. They don't allow hostile, contemptuous speech to go unchecked. That's what these uniters do. And then here's the kicker, and this is exactly what the governor was just saying. When you do those things, guess what emerges? Transformational ideas nobody thought of. Because if you're locked like this, you're only stuck psychologically and socially in a win-lose world. The only way for this to be resolved is for me to win. But if you actually practice those other qualities, new ideas, new solutions emerge. I think of the work that was done here in the state of Utah around the LGBTQ issues, but I also think of the story of my own mom in the Special Olympics movement. Now remember, I'll just go a quick digression here. You talk about othering and demonizing. People with intellectual disabilities in 1968, the year of the first Special Olympics event, there were 200,000 Americans in institutions for life. You want to talk about othering? I mean, I could do the whole, talk about a lecture. I mean, it wouldn't be pleasant. Mothers giving up their children forever. Because why? They were too different to belong. Just what Republicans say about Democrats. No, just kidding. But no, this is a serious point. So what did she do? She designed a transformational intervention, not predicated on demonizing the mothers or the doctors, predicated on bringing them together in an environment in which the question was, what is your gift? What is the gift of the 8-year-old with Down syndrome? He can run. All of a sudden, you got an 8-year-old running his race or her race, and the world is watching, even a few people, and all the preconceptions. Wait a minute, this child is broken, is scary, is terrifying, would ruin my life if it were my child. And then all of a sudden the child runs the race and his hands are up in the air. And a transformation takes place. They didn't have to get beaten down with the solution. And the institution's empty. And 94-142, the Education of All Americans Act is passed within 5 or 6 years. I don't mean Special Olympics did all that, but it laid the groundwork for transformational solutions. Not either or, not win-lose solutions. So we think this kind of a formula, we'll be working on this, social science and and the political science of it. But we think there's the makings of a formula here. And when we've gone back and looked at great innovations in American history, the innovations of the land-grant colleges, the innovations of the volunteer fire departments, we've gone through and seen these, some of the New Deal, the Peace Corps, some things in which people have come together over the years. We've seen these ingredients in all of them. So the question people then say, well, come on, not in the 21st century, you can't do that. Our view is quite the opposite. It's already happening. It's already happening. Now, just look at, I got the great honor to spend a good deal of time last night and today with First Lady Abby Cox. Look at her initiatives for the state of Utah. Social and emotional learning in schools, not political, not divisive, transformational, raises test scores, improves behavior, improves sense of purpose, improves sense of belonging, improves mental health, self-esteem. Where's the hate-filled debate? Where's the culture war? There isn't one. It's a transformation. Look at the service projects. What do Americans all know? Why don't we do more of this? Escalate these things. And of course, I'm so proud to include Special Olympics unified sports. Same thing. Let's get kids learning inclusion from an early age. So these are Uniter, the initiative on foster children and foster families. Why shouldn't we set a goal that no child will reach the age of 18 without family? Who's going to disagree? Who's going to come at you from your flank? Who's going to find a problem with it? These are the kinds of things right here in the state. This is the Millennial Action Project. This was just started a few years ago. A whole group of state-level legislatures, Republicans and Democrats, that can't stand the way their elders have run the legislatures in their party. So they've created something called the Millennial Action Project, which brings them together as a way of cultivating the kind of shared understanding and shared relationships at the level of state legislatures around the country. Very exciting, new, different, but it's a lot of people saying, we can't stand it anymore. We're not going to make it this way. So our view is not only do we need to train and encourage this kind of technique, but we need to tell the story. Because remember what we said about the media? The more time, if you went around this room and charted everybody's time watching cable news, and we found out who watched the most, and if statistically that's the angriest person in the room. It's not just it's causal. The stories we tell each other are making us sick of each other. So our view is, let's tell the story of Uniters. Let's create a unity news beat. We think we should start this right here in Utah. Tammy thinks we should, so of course I agree. But what if we had reporters? There's reporters covering the crime beat. There's reporters covering the State House. There's reporters covering the governor's mansion. There's reporters covering fashion, sports, business, the stock market. What if we trained a group of reporters to cover Uniters? What if we set them off to find the deep story of people who are risking their reputations, making the choice to respect the dignity of others, crossing divides, and generating transformation, however big or small, in our communities? What if those were on your news feed? What if you woke up in the morning to find someone who'd put their life on the line, not to kill someone else, but to save lives of people he or she didn't even know? What if you found the people who are solving problems like homelessness and mental health crises every morning, not because they were Republicans or Democrats, not because they won an election or lost an election, not because they killed, but because they'd found a transformational idea? So we think this is doable, that we can make the fundamental question, again, I'm going to go back to fundamentals here. I think the fundamental question is not will Republicans or Democrats prevail. It's not will the young or the old prevail. It's will uniters or dividers prevail. And, you know, we've heard it said, you know, Republicans and Democrats can't get along, but we say everyone belongs. We heard it said people with disabilities and non-disabled people can't be together. We say everyone has a gift. You know, you've heard it said that gay and straight people can't work together. We say everyone deserves dignity. You've heard it said that black folks and people of color and white folks are irreconcilably. We say everybody deserves justice. Now, why is that so controversial? To me, it's the best of our country. And it shouldn't be controversial. And too often, it's the stories we've heard about the other that makes us think, well, wait a minute, slow down there. That's not my values. Slow down there. Those people. That's not America, in my view. It's not the country I actually was raised in. I was raised in a country in which I looked up to my parents, I looked up to my uncles, I looked up to my family, and I thought to myself, you know, the one thing I see in this family is a lot of grief, honestly, and a lot of pain, and a lot of commitment to channel that grief into doing something good for the country. I don't think I was rare. I don't think I am rare. I think a lot of people want to feel that way. They just don't feel permission. They just don't feel like they've got anybody else with them. So we wrote a book, and the book tells you, you got a lot of people with you. You've got pastors and swamis and imams with you, rabbis with you. You've got Republicans and Democrats, they're with you. You've got social change agents and teachers with you. You've got ex-cons and homeless women with you, waiting for you, hoping for you, asking for you, calling you. I know the LDS Church uses this language of calling. I think our country's calling us. And I think we have a lot of work to do to answer the call. So we think this is possible. We did the book. I'm not going to read my own quote there, but I'm going to leave. Tammy put that in there. So it's such a good. I'm not reading my own quote, but I'll leave you with this image. This is one of my heroes, Scarlett Lewis, and I think she was given the chance, painfully, tragically, the worst call you can get. That's her little boy Jesse, who was killed at Sandy Hook in the first grade. And she was confronted by a lot of division, both within herself and within her community, a lot of division politically after that massacre, a lot of pain. And she could have taken any path, and no one would have blamed her. Certainly I wouldn't have. She decided to commit herself because she felt her child was calling her. And so she's now taking her curriculum. It's called Choose Love. It's a social and emotional learning curriculum to schools around the country. New Hampshire, other states, I'm sure it's here in some schools in Utah. She dedicates the curriculum to her son, and she dedicates it to Adam Lanza, who took her son's life. Because she feels like if he'd had a country and a school that taught that compassion, that reached out and was open, that saw him and his gifts, that was able to cross the divides of his challenges and bring him into some kind of solution, that her little boy would still be alive. Now, that's a big soul. But even if you've only got a little one like me, even if you can't imagine ever being, and God forbid any of us are, in that kind of a situation, we can look to those who have been there and who can teach us. So we can look to our great prophets and religious leaders. We can look to our religious traditions. We can look to our political history. And we can look right in our own midst to those who are taking big chances to answer this question. Will the uniter prevail, or will the divider prevail? All of us own responsibility for our role in division. All of us. Put my hand up. I've been a part of the problem. I don't want to do it anymore. And I want this institute to be a place where people come to learn how not to. Thank you very much. Thank you. 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 Very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.